Hello, everybody. Well, I think we are live. The screen's rather dark. I don't know if it is for you guys. Hope everyone's doing really well. And I just wanted to say hi on the Sunday and to introduce a little topic, and that topic is family drama, right? And why I thought I'd talk about that is because with the new moon in Cancer conjunct Jupiter, it does throw a little bit of spotlight on home life. Part of home life is family. Now, the sign of Cancer is a lot about our roots, our background, the emotional sort of ballpark, right, that we're in, the emotional foundations we have. And obviously, these are all going to stem from our family background and our childhood. So the new moon conjunct Jupiter is a wonderful opportunity for healing family wounds. And I think everybody has them to a certain extent because family life is complicated. Life is complicated. With a lot of people, with my clients, they all feel as if they're the only one facing certain problems, and as if they are the odd one out. And I always say to everybody, life is like a shop window, and it is particularly so in this age of social media and Facebook and Instagram, all right? That's like the shop window. And think of a shop window when you walk down the streets, whether it's Primark, whether it's Armani, whether it's Massimo Dutti, whether it's Marks and Spencer or Topshop or Sweet 70 or whatever the stores you guys have. They put the best things in the window. They don't put the for sale stuff that no one wanted. They don't put the stuff that's a little bit shop soiled or broken. They put the best stuff in the window to attract your attention, to get you interested. And that's what social media is. It's the shop window. It's the best of people's lives. It's what they want you to see. It's the image they want to project. A lot of people want you to think they are successful, their relationships are great, their life is perfect, and they will inevitably be only taking photos of good events. So they'll put those photos on Facebook and Instagram. I mean, you don't take photos when you're feeling grotty or you're hungover, upset, crying over your ex. You're not going to take a photo of that. But if you're out at a party, you will take a photo. And that goes on social media. That's what people see. And a lot of people get a false perspective from that. They think everyone else's life is going swell and it's only them. And it's the same with family matters. When we're young, we tend not to speak about family matters. We tend to feel that we shouldn't tell other people what's going on. And therefore, everyone is got on their game face, their brave face, and you don't know what's going on behind closed doors. And something that someone said to me, which I think is very helpful, is there's no such thing as normal, right? Within a family context, right? No such thing as normal. And that is very reassuring because everyone often thinks that, oh, it's just my family that's like this. It's just me that's maybe the black sheep. It's just me that's not gelling, or it's just me that's in this kind of rather difficult, convoluted, destructive, narcissistic, emotional turmoil in my family. But it's not just you. Everyone is going to be faced within their family environment and their early environment with these emotional problems. With some people, their parents are very detached, and that leads to people not having attachment issues as they go through life. Often people with moon in Sag, moon in Gemini, had parents that, while were adequate, communicative, and maybe stimulated them in many ways, didn't teach them emotional attachment. Then you'll have people with other moon signs, maybe the water signs, Pisces, Cancer, whose parents were too emotionally clingy, emotionally needy, perhaps projected their emotional problems on their children, made their children feel responsible for their emotions, and those people will carry those sort of scars. Other moon signs and star signs had parents which encouraged their independence and maybe said, grow up, get on with it, keep on a brave face, and that. So everyone will carry these wounds, but there's no such thing as normal. No one has a normal upbringing. Everyone's going to have things that they later look back on and think, that was weird. That wasn't right. Or that scarred me. And it's okay to feel that way. And I think also people carry an enormous amount of guilt about family members, particularly family members who've deceased. They think, I didn't do enough. I didn't behave right. I perhaps wasn't sympathetic enough to that family member. Maybe I should have done more. Maybe I should have been more compassionate. It's also normal to have those feelings. When we're in the moment, there's always so much that's competing with our attention. We've got the work thing. We've got people have children that they have to prioritize. People have, the daily grind, bureaucracy. If you don't fill in your tax return, they'll send you to jail, right? So there's always competing things for your attention that detract from the emotional support or what you could be doing in your family life. So it's important not to have too much guilt. And also, there's a case of the chicken and the egg situation in families. Is what came first? Was it my reaction to things, or was that a result of the way that I had been conditioned, right? Because we absorb an enormous amount of conditioning as we're going through those early years, which affect our impulse reactions to emotional situations. Doesn't mean they're right or wrong, but they mean they're often knee-jerk and impulsive, and perhaps we need to be more mindful of those knee-jerk reactions, which are sometimes lead to relationships that are reactionships rather than actual relationships as well in later life. So what we have with Jupiter conjunct the new moon in Cancer is just a time maybe we should sit back, do some journaling, some brainstorming about our earliest moments of life, what our earliest memories are. Are those memories of stress, of worry? Did we feel there was a dark cloud? Did we feel that we were living around a volcano? Because a lot of children feel that there could be an eruption. Maybe the parents aren't getting on, or there's a lot of stress in the household and they're really worried there could be a reaction at any moment. So people might carry a lot of stress from that. That can also lead to a lot of overcompensating or even perfectionism later in life, or the need to control situations because as a child maybe you felt a loss of control. And sometimes as well people feel very vulnerable and out of control in those early environments, which leads to a desire later to be incredibly powerful, perhaps be famous, because you feel famous people are untouchable, so you'd aspire to fame because you think, wow, that's the way to protect against being a victim or being vulnerable. So I would suggest doing, like I say, some journaling, some brainstorming, perhaps some meditating on things from your distant past, just casting your mind back to that early family environment and thinking, what was going on there? Why did I feel? How does that affect me now? And how did that affect later family outcomes? Always remembering that there's no such thing as normal. Another thing someone once said to me is that families are mini cults. Now, what is a cult? In a cult, there's a lot of brainwashing, secrecy. You need to be loyal to the cult. They often discourage you from mixing with people outside the cult. They discourage you talking about the cult with other people who are not members of the cult. And there's a fair amount of rituals and norms within that cult. And that does describe family life to a T. There's all sorts of things that your family will do that they perceive as normal, that's different from others. And often there's a bit of an isolationist thing where families think we're better than the other families because we do this and they do that. And all this impacts us, but it can impact us in a negative way. It can cultivate a lot of guilt in confronting the realities of the situation. So often we need to take a step back from that, and we have to understand where we are now, what mindsets were useful that we absorbed in childhood, and what mindsets were put there as manipulative tools and maybe weren't that useful. And then we need to distill it all down and see how we can change. We also need to deal with perhaps analyzing the guilt we have over ways we reacted which wasn't appropriate. You only live and learn in life. Life is a learning experience, and you learn something every day until you die, and you keep making mistakes. A lot of people think they're eventually going to reach the stage. Some people think it's going to be at age 24. Some people it's 30, at 40, at 50, where suddenly it all clicks, and now we got it all sorted. But there's always going to be a challenge to that, because life is meant to be a spiritual battle. If it was easy, well, there'd be no contest, nothing much to do. We'd all be living the perfect life. None of us are. None of us are living the perfect life. We all are a work in progress, right? And we've got to keep thinking about what we're doing, why we're doing, who we are, and striving to develop our own attitudes that are independent to us. I'm not saying you have to throw in the bin everything that you carried forward from childhood. Not everything is bad, but it's understanding what was good, bad, and unhelpful, and what was really good that grounded and rooted you, and then thinking about where that places you now. Because, gosh, so much in astrology comes up. People in relationships have so much unconditional programming from their mothers or their primary caregivers that they carry forward into the relationship. And they do it automatically because they're not thinking. They are in a constant reactionship, right? So if you're in a relationship, it means you're conscious. It means you understand how relationships work, what you bring, what they bring, and you're mindful of the emotions you bring into that relationship and how you project. But if you're in a reactionship, it means your whole life is a reaction to anger, pain, angst, lack of fulfillment, lack of nourishment in your young life. And that's negatively affecting your relationship. So that's kind of something that astrology teaches. Now, something I also want to talk about is a generational factor. Now, it's very common for people who are Gen X. So that's people who are born mainly in the 70s, early 80s, up to 84. So mainly it's 67 to 84, but it's primarily people born in the 70s. Most people born in the 70s have a parent who's a boomer. Boomers were born sort of between 41 and 61, right? But I'm thinking more of people born in the 40s and 50s who will have Pluto in Leo. Now, Pluto in a Leo is a pugnacious, poignant, pungent energy, right? Pluto in Leo was extremely controlling, assertive, headstrong, powerful, needs a great deal of creative expression, but sometimes this became extreme and they projected that in an authoritarian way. So if you were a child born in Gen X and you were Scorpio, Leo, and Taurus, or you had those rising signs, it's very likely you would have clashed with a parent with Pluto in Leo, that they would have been incredibly controlling or even narcissistic, and your relationship, although close, could have also been fraught, and there could have been an enormous amount of undercurrents of resentment running through. There may have been resentment for your parents to you, resentment for you to your parents. You both may crave the relationship, yet kind of rebel against the relationship. There's often very powerful themes of control. As I say, it's more poignant within the fixed signs and the fixed rising signs than it would possibly be for the others. But even if you're not one of those signs, you may have a fixed moon sign in which it can also affect you. So always bear in mind that your parents' Pluto placement will have a huge bearing on how your relationship with theirs is. And because the boomer generation mainly had Pluto in Leo, it was a particularly assertive, strident, uncompromising side of Leo that can lead parents to create a paradigm for their children, to be very prescriptive of what they want, to perhaps be quite controlling, and also use a lot of mind games in order to get what they want, and you may have struggled with that. Now, if you are Aquarius, it's likely you keep attracting your parent through relationships. So if you're Aquarius or Aquarius rising in your Gen X, you are always going through these difficult relationship dynamics where your partner is always feeling to be controlling, manipulative, an energy vampire, wanting more and more from you, never satisfied. You are continually tackling these particularly narcissistic themes through partners, and that is something you need to be aware of. Now, for those who have parents with Pluto in Virgo, it's a little bit of a different dynamic. The Pluto in Leo operates far more powerfully and strongly, and Pluto was in Leo for quite a long period, and it had a huge effect on that kind of boomer generation. Their mindsets were particularly set. They had very strong fixed ideas, usually very powerful personalities, and they would use that to create enormous sort of strides in the world. Like the boomers have shaped the world we're in. A lot of them are still working and still very much involved in affairs, both politically, socially, and in the family. And so they've had a huge effect through the strength of this personality. But often, depending on your personality, their strength of personality may have been obstructive to your development of personality or you finding yourself. So perhaps you did more to please them, accommodate them, or play their games rather than playing your games. So I think I've got a short little TikTok video I'm going to put out on that just to introduce this topic. So I hope you enjoyed that, and I hope it resonates, particularly now with Jupiter new moon, Jupiter conjunct new moon in Cancer. Thanks, guys.